Mayors. My name is Stacy Fujii with the African American Mayors Association. We are pleased you joined us today for the Land Use and Appraisals While Black session as part of the 2024 Economic Mobility Leadership Institute. After today's session and office hour, we will meet virtually 2 more times as a cohort. Then you will be released to implement your carefully crafted strategic plans. Thank you to all the cities that have submitted drafts of your plan. For those of you who have not, please submit your plan no later than close of business tomorrow. I don't want you to be fearful. I just want to see a draft, and then we're going to review your strategic plan and we'll return your drafts with comments. Should you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email for the quickest response. Finally, it is almost time for AMA to disperse your subgrants. If your office has not submitted your financial information, please email me with your contact's name, email address, and a physical address so that we may send your subgrant without issue. Thank you. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce AMA's Managing Director and Chief of Staff, Carlos Nichols, for the welcome.
Thank you so much, Stacy. Welcome, mayors and staff. Want to just call your names, believe in putting your names into space. Mayor Rainey, Mayor Borgelin, Mayor Holiday Ingram, Mayor Johnson, Mayor Evans, Mayor Scott, Mayor Simmons, Mayor Lumumba, Mayor Williams, Mayor Young, Mayor Parker, and Mayor Jones. It is so great to see everyone and your representatives on the call. As you all know, ALMA's Economic Mobility Leadership Institute is focusing on critical learning opportunities for mayors and their teams, with this goal of creating strategic economic mobility plans to implement in your respective municipalities. Today's session will be about land usage and appraisals while Black. Again, land usage and appraisals while Black. From a December 5th, 2022 report, Brookings estimates the median appraisal is 15% lower in majority Black neighborhoods compared to homes in neighborhoods where less than 1% of the population is Black. And the cost of devaluation across the 113 metro areas in the US with at least one majority Black neighborhood is $162 billion. Our 1 hour long session will provide insight or data, as well as share necessary and helpful tools available to develop greater opportunities for wealth creation and retention in your communities. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Victoria.
Thank you so much, Carlos. And hello, mayors. It is so lovely to see all of you again. I am Victoria Thompson. I am the new Director of Grants and Senior Program Manager here at ALMA. And today, our friends from the USDA will lead us in a discussion around land usage programs that your constituents may benefit from. Afterwards, our partners from the National Society of Real Estate Appraisers, NSREA, will lead us in a presentation detailing their timely work around appraisals. And also, please remember to use the chat feature to ask questions throughout the session. And without further ado, let us begin. A key component of the EMLI mayoral cohort is for mayors to create a strategic plan that incorporates financial tools for their constituents to improve their financial standing, protects assets, and creates generational wealth. Land is still a rich commodity that allows families to maximize income opportunities and pass on resources to future generations. There are many aspects of land ownership we could discuss, from acquisition to paying taxes to adverse possessions, squatters, and foreclosures. But today, we're going to highlight specifically how do landowners maximize land use. We have a robust showing from the USDA today. J. Latrice Hill serves as the Equity Officer for USDA's Farm Service Agency. In this position, she serves as Senior Advisor to the Administrator, ensuring the Office of Administrator's equity and access criteria are fully considered and applied across FSA programs. Additionally, joining for office hours will be Brandy Borton. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Please correct me if I am wrong. And John Boyes. We're so excited to have you all to be a part of today's convening. And please welcome Latrice and her colleagues to the Economic Mobility Leadership Institute.
Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, good afternoon, depends on where you are in the world. Nice to be with you all. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me just a second. Okay. Please let me know when you're able to view it.
We can see your screen now.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your patience. Again, good afternoon. My name is Latrice Hill. I serve as an advisor to the administrator of the Farm Service Agency in Washington, D.C. So honored to be here to talk with you, mayors, about a few programs that I feel will be very beneficial to you and your constituents and surrounding communities. First of all, as you know, the Department of Agriculture is huge. We have about 29 different agencies. So when you say USDA, we range anywhere from SNAP benefits to food, animal inspections. But my agency is the Farm Service Agency. We are the agency that provides farm loans and commodity payments to farmers and ranchers. Sadly, you all probably know us as the agency that has been hit with 4 discrimination lawsuits. And just recently, last week, we implemented a program which was part of the Inflation Reduction Act. It was the Discrimination Financial Assistance Program. If there had been farmers who had been discriminated against the Farm Service Agency between a period of time, they were able to apply. We had a third party to process those applications, and payments went out last week, over $2.2 billion. So that's probably how you know my agency. If I say Black Farmers Lawsuit, you'll know exactly who we are. But today I want to talk to you about a new day at FSA. This administration has been very supportive in supporting equity in our programs and equity to access. As it relates to what this group of mayors is interested in, land usage, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the programs that we have that are specific to land usages. Real quickly, I want to clarify what our agency does. We are two-pronged. When you come into our offices, you have a set of staff that handles farm programs, which are the commodity payments, the subsidy payments, disaster assistance that doesn't have to be paid back. And then you have farm loans, which are, as they state, loans, which have to be repaid by the farm loan borrowers. I want to start in talking to you about a couple of farm programs that I think would be very beneficial to your constituents. First of all, we have something called the Conservation Reserve Program. This is a program, this is FSA's flagship program. We have had this program for decades, and it is the one where producers or landowners are able to receive payments from USDA to implement practices that don't disturb their land. So basically, they can plant trees, pine trees, and receive a rental payment from the government for it. They are not to touch the land or the trees for a contract period of 10 to 15 years. And what this is doing is it allows the government a way to preserve environmentally sensitive ag land, but it's also a way for families, especially Black families who may have land that's just sitting there not being used. This is an opportunity to make money by basically not touching or disturbing the land. The CRP program, there is a sign up usually every year when landowners are able to submit a bid to enter a contract to enter into the program. Again, The contracts range from 10 to 15 years. They will receive an annual payment from USDA. There are going to be situations where they're allowed to bend the land. And I'm going to let Brandy and John talk to you in specifics when you have your office hours about the details. But this is a program where basically the land can make money for landowners and they won't have to do much. The same program has a sub-program called the Transition Incentives Program. This program, let's say I'm a landowner and I have my land enrolled in CRP, and I'm at the end of that 10-year contract. It's time for me to renew because my contract is expiring. Well, if I decided that I wanted to rent my land, lease my land, or even sell my land to a minority farmer or a beginning farmer or a veteran farmer, once again, the government's going to pay me to do that. This is the Transition Incentives Program. This is allowing an existing landowner to transfer or lease that land over to a minority, socially disadvantaged producer or a beginning farmer so that they can get started. Of course, they too will continue to work the land. It has to be an ag production. It's not just selling them property. They have to have the land into production, but it's taking this land that has been out of production and selling it or leasing it to a minority who's just getting started or may need that land. This is another program that I think would be beneficial that a lot of people don't know about. And again, Brandy and John can cover any questions you have on that in the office hours. Okay, farm loans. Now, these are, of course, loans that have to be repaid by borrowers. We have two different kinds. We have direct and guaranteed. Direct is when an applicant or producer comes into one of our offices. And I failed to mention, we have over 2,300 offices across the country, over 51 state offices. And of course, we have headquarters where policy is implemented here in DC. But the loan programs, direct is when someone comes directly into our county office and applies with FSA. A guaranteed loan would be if a person went to a commercial lender, a bank, an ag lender, and decided to submit an application. That lender has the option to apply to FSA for a guarantee. It may not be needed, but if for whatever reason that lender feels that they need the security or the backing of USDA, they can apply to us for a guarantee. So at that point, the bank becomes our customer, whereas with a direct loan, the applicant is our customer. The different loan types are farm ownership, farm operating, and then we have something called youth loans that I want to talk to you about as well. There are special funding pots that are available for the loans. I'll cover that. But for guaranteed, again, when you go to the bank, it would be a farm ownership or a farm operating loan. I'm not going to go through all of the eligibility requirements because, as you can imagine, it is very stringent. It's applying for a loan. But basically, it has to be, when you come to Farm Service Agency, it has to be that you're unable to obtain credit anywhere else. You've gone to the lender, you've gone to the commercial bank, and they've said, no, we're not able to help you with a loan or a guaranteed loan. And of course, you have to have an acceptable credit history. There's no specific credit score as we evaluate everything that's on that credit report. We want to know that you do have a favorable history of repayment. As you know, we all have problems. There are times when borrowers or applicants may get behind. They may have some delinquent payments. That's fine. That doesn't mean that we're automatically going to say no. We're going to talk to you about that. What was going on with you during that time? It could have been that you lost your job. You were going through a divorce. We're going to work with you. And if there's a way for you to document your circumstance and establish a repayment plan with those lenders, those creditors, we'll include that amount into your cash flow projection. So I'll just give you an example. If it's credit card debt that someone has, if they set up a payment plan, let's say with Visa, to pay $100 a month, we're going to include that $100 a month repayment plan into the cash flow projection. So we do work with you. It's not that we just look at the credit report and say, no, credit's awful, no, denied. That's not how it should be. That's not how it should be. I'll repeat that. It should be that that loan officer works with the applicant through those circumstances. Of course, they can't be delinquent on any other federal debt. So if there's a tax lien or any other federal debt that is left owing, student loans, then they will not be eligible. They will work with the farm loan officer to develop a realistic farm plan and make sure that there's enough collateral to secure the loan. Now, there will be some criteria that the applicant must adhere to after they are approved for the loan. There's training. You know, we want to set each applicant up for success. So we do require that there's training courses, whether it's in ag production or financial, business finance, whatever it is that that applicant is in need of, we have a set of vendors that offer the training to train these applicants. And of course, we want them to have farm experience. It needs to be someone who has some kind of experience working on a farm or has had some type of formal training. Now, the types of loan, this is what I wanted to stress, the different types of loan. So I know I'm speaking with mayors, and so a lot of you are in urban, suburban, a few of you may be in a few rural areas, but our farm operating loan is one that I feel would be beneficial to even your urban producers who are living there within the city limits. We do have a lot of urban agriculture that is being established across the country, and our farm operating loans would support urban ag. Operating is funding you would use to pay for any operating expenses, purchasing equipment, livestock, and I'm thinking for urban ag, the purchase of seeds, materials, equipment. These are things that would be covered by an operating loan. The maximum loan amount for operating loan is $400,000, and the term is up to 7 years. Whereas the farm ownership is purchasing any land, property. So this may be a little bit more on the rural side because we are talking about farms. This would be an opportunity for them to purchase a farm or purchase land, make improvements to an existing farm. The limit for that is $600,000, and the term could be anywhere up to 40 years for that. Youth loans, this is something that I want to make sure that you as mayors are aware that we are trying to support the next generation of farmers, and we are encouraging youth to be involved in agriculture. Any youth who is a member of an ag organization such as FFA, 4-H, or any type of supervised entity, let's say that there is, I'm just going to give an example. Let's say that the local Black Farmers Co-op, they are willing to mentor and work with youth, and they want to sponsor youth in ag projects. They could be mentors. It's not limited to just FFA and 4-H. Those are the two traditional organizations that have supported and sponsored youth loans, but there may be local cooperatives in the community that would be willing to assist the youth. At FSA, we don't do the the formal training or the educating. We're just the financial arm. So to make sure that that youth is receiving full training with whatever that project is, they need to have that sponsor. The sponsor would write that letter and say, I'm willing to sponsor Latrice Hill in her youth loan project to grow tomatoes and sell tomatoes at the local farmers market. As a youth, they are allowed to borrow up to $5,000. There's no co-signing. The parents do have to state that they are aware and they support their child, but they're not liable for the debt. The youth is liable for this debt. And again, it's up to $5,000. Depending on the operation, if it is something, as I mentioned, growing tomatoes, it may be that I have an annual payment, or it could be that I have a monthly payment. It just depends on my growing season, when I expect to receive the produce, when I'd be able to pay my note. Over the years, and I used to be a loan officer in Mississippi many years ago. Over the years, I have seen this program benefit many youth. They have been able to have youth loans to get started, save money for college. It has really been a stepping stone for them into agriculture, because once you've had youth loans, and they're open for ages 10 to 20, once you're age 21, you're eligible to apply for a regular direct loan. And having that youth loan is experience that will go towards that direct loan. So I will say that it is a very positive program, but I'm going to keep it very honest and open with you. Back in the day when I was a loan officer, I did see a few people abuse the program. You had parents who were farmers and decided, oh, I'm going to take my kids to get a youth loan. And they would buy, let's say, cattle. They would sell the cattle. They weren't paying the youth's note. And I do recall one youth, this is just a quick story I want to share. One youth called me. She was at the financial aid office in college. She was a freshman and she was enrolling, and she was in tears. And she said, Miss Latrice, they're telling me that I can't get my student loan or my Pell Grant because I'm delinquent on a federal debt with USDA. What is that? I don't know what that is. Well, she didn't realize, because she didn't make the payment, it went against her. And so it was on her record as delinquent in a federal debt. And it wasn't her fault. It was the parent at that time who had not paid it. Over the years, we have changed that. So it's not going to follow that youth through college to negatively impact them. I'm glad that that was changed. But I just wanted to share with you the opportunity and the pitfalls of a program like this. Farm stores facility loans, again, I'm thinking more in the urban spaces. You may have urban ag producers who may need refrigerated or cold storage. You know, we're for all farmers, whether you're urban, suburban, or rural. You may know that there are storage facilities for grain and feed and seed, but also with produce, there's a need for cold storage or refrigerated trucks. Our agency does implement the farm storage facility loan, which is able to assist producers in those needs. The maximum amount to borrow is $500,000, and then those storage and handling trucks can be financed up to $100,000. Other loans that I'll just mention that the agency has would be emergency loans. So when there's disaster or flooding that has impacted livestock or crops of farmers, they are able, if that area, state, or county has been determined a disaster area or designated disaster declaration, then they are eligible to apply for emergency loans. Again, emergency loans have to be repaid. So that's different from FEMA assistance. These have to be repaid. Heirs property. As this is AMA, we are very familiar with heirs property issues. This is something that has negatively impacted the African American community for years, as well as tribal producers. Heirs property, for anyone who may not know, would be when their land has passed down from generation to generation without clear ownership of the land. The 2018 Farm Bill allowed FSA to accept alternative documents to establish a farm with USDA. So if you're a farm, if you're an ag producer, no matter what USDA program you're enrolling in, your first start is with the Farm Service Agency, where you enroll your farm and you're given a farm number. It's like an identifier to identify this is your farm, this is the tract of land, this is the number of acres, this is what you're growing. That's your ticket, that's your passport to apply for a lot of the USDA programs. In the past, to get that farm number, you had to show that you had control of the land, ownership, or if you were leasing it, you had to have a lease. This was difficult for a lot of heirs because they may not have had the deed to the land. It could have been several siblings sharing. Well, with that 2018 Farm Bill, there are now different things that they can submit to FSA to show that they do have control of the land. So, and I'll give you an example. If there are heirs and there's one particular sibling who is farming, and the siblings have agreed that he does run the property as far as agricultural uses, they can all sign an affidavit, and the heir can come in, or he could self-certify and say, I am operating the land for my family right now. It's virtually seamless now to come in and actually establish a farm number. You don't have to have that deed to show ownership. So that's one change that came about in the 2018 Farm Bill.
Latrice, I am so sorry. My apologies. We're almost at time, but you have given an excellent presentation. If possible, I just want to leave room for, I think we have room for one question.
Okay.
Possibly, if anybody would like to ask a question, I'm going to lower my hand as well.
Okay. And I apologize for going over.
Oh, no, it was excellent. I almost went over time myself. I'm like, oh, this is really good information. So thank you. Did anyone have a question for Latrice? Okay, if not, Stacy, I don't know if you had a question.
I do, and I know we'll have some more time with Latrice's other colleagues in office hours, but for the youth program, you said as long as it's supervised. So
Mhm.
does that mean if the mayors in a rural community decided to have some type of program, they would be a supervising entity, or does it have to be one that's agricultural? Just kind
It
of
needs to
curious.
agricultural. It has to be
Okay.
someone who knows and can guide that youth. Um, so yes, agricultural.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't think that we have any more questions. Latrice, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know that your team will stay on with us for office hours, and I'm sure we're going to have a few more questions. But again, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So next we have, a 2021 study by Freddie Mac found that Black and Latino homeowners are about twice as likely as white homeowners to get lower appraisals. According to the report, 12.5% of the properties in predominantly Black census tract areas receive appraisal values lower than contract price. Today, we are joined by the president of the National Association of Real Estate Appraisers, Mr. Brian Cox. He has served as the national president of the National Society of Real Estate Appraisers since 2024 and holds various leadership positions within the National Association of Real Estate Brokers and the Appraisal Foundation. Please welcome Brian Cox to EMLI.
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to present. I want to kind of somewhat, and I do apologize for not having a PowerPoint prepared. I was given this opportunity on yesterday evening, and so my typical preparation that I would provide for something like this. It was not allocated, so I do apologize for that. But I'd like to provide some information that I think may be resourceful and useful to the Black mayors and to Black individuals, real estate professionals in general. I had the opportunity recently to provide a presentation at the NAREB conference on appraisal bias. And I elected to do a slightly different presentation. Other presentations I've heard as it relates to appraisal bias have been very informative and useful. However, typically the content relates to a lot of historical data, historical context in terms of how appraisal bias is started, how it affects the community, what are the numbers of, what is the impact on generational wealth, and all those are very good components of information to be aware of. However, in real time, an individual, whether it be a homeowner or a real estate professional or a governmental entity, particularly individuals on the useful side of the appraisal, meaning someone who's using that appraisal to purchase a home, refinance a home, or the like. They want to know, if I suspect appraisal bias, if something like this happens to me, what do I do about it? What are the steps that are taken? What are the resources that I have? And so my presentation and the information that I'm going to provide to you all today will be somewhat of a bullet point in terms of that context. And so the first thing is, we know that appraisal bias is a lower value to a home of the because of race of the person who lives there, and it can happen consciously or unconsciously, meaning that some appraisers, and once again, I don't want to get off track, but some appraisers, appraising is very subjective. And so there's something called the final reconciliation of value. Once you have all your comparable data and you've made all of your adjustments, there's still a certain level of discretion that an appraiser can use to come up with that value. And so if they have a way of thinking and looking at minority communities within a certain context, they're more apt to come in at that lower end of the value range. And that's one of the advantages and disadvantages of the appraisal profession, based on the subjectivity of how these values are derived. But we also know that one home undervalued because of discrimination not only hurts that homeowner, that can hurt the entire neighborhood. And one undervalued home can lead to other homes in the neighborhood also being undervalued, because you have now, this house sets a precedence. It sets, this is a comparable sale that was lowballed, for lack of better words. And then now we have other appraisers coming in and using this sale to value other houses in the neighborhood. And this thing, it just builds on itself. And so one of the first and the primary resources to address or combat this is going to be education. It's going to be the education of the real estate broker and agent, and education of the homeowner. And when I say education, I think that it would be prudent to maybe have within the various local communities throughout the United States, within the city, some type of training and exposure for the general public in terms of, how do you read an appraisal? And not necessarily how do you become an appraiser, but what do you look for in an appraisal report that would key you, wait a minute, something is not right here. What is the language? What are the mathematical adjustments? Appraisers have to follow a particular format. Even though it's somewhat subjective, there's a format that's followed. And so and that's one of the things I did in my presentation. I used a case study of a situation where somebody's home was undervalued, and I went through a step-by-step process of what was done. By coincidence, it was my brother's home, or a home that he has in New Orleans, it kind of was in real time for me as well. So I was able to write the appraisal. It's called an appraisal rebuttal, and provide this to the mortgage company, and then ultimately to the investigations department for the Louisiana Real Estate Commission. But nevertheless, what you want to do is, step one would be to create additional education and awareness on the part of real estate professionals in the industry. So as they have a homeowner, whether it be a buyer or seller, and this property value, this based on their instincts, based on the research that they've done, does not come in an amount that they deem to be fair, then there's certain steps that you would take as far as evaluating and analyzing this report to determine if something is off or not. And then once you've taken those steps, the next most important component is how to articulate your findings in the appropriate narrative format so you can provide this information to the appropriate governmental entity. Governmental entity, or even a starting point would be, before it generally would get to that point, once an appraisal comes in low, the homeowner or the home purchaser has an opportunity to do what's called an appraisal rebuttal. And so even if once you've determined that there are some issues with this report that somewhat stand out, you want to know how to properly articulate in a narrative format your concerns. Because once again, if if this becomes emotional and you're not able to clearly identify what's wrong with the report, they're gonna, they meaning the lending institution is not gonna give credence. They're not gonna give the appropriate concerns to issues that you basically called to their attention. So having a format, and what I did is I had a PowerPoint presentation that I could provide at a later point to the individuals on this call. And it listed a step-by-step methodology in terms of identifying certain issues with the appraisal report, and then addressing these issues in a narrative format so the issues can be provided to. Step one is the appraisal to the lender. And then step two would be theoretically, you could provide these appraisal concerns once properly addressed and put in the appropriate format to the state regulating authority that regulates the appraisal profession. Every state has an appraisal board. And so sometimes if you don't get the appropriate response from the lender, you would theoretically maybe go to the state regulating authority. And once again, you'd have your complaint itemized and written in a format that would warrant. In other words, the homeowner or the agent, you're not doing the investigation, but what you're doing is that you're calling the issues out in this individual situation to someone that can launch an investigation. You're really, lining this up or teeing this up for an individual to say, hey, wait a minute, there's something going on here based on the concerns of the homeowner, and an investigation that has to be employed. And so all complaints have to be investigated by state regulating authorities that regulate the appraisal profession. If your complaint is generally not properly formatted or articulated, you may lose something in the translation, and you may not get, they may do an investigation, but it's just a very surface investigation, and they say there's no findings here and they move on. But once again, properly identifying or categorizing or articulating your concerns will warrant their awareness that a more thorough investigation should be conducted. The next thing is you would have the potential complaint provided to HUD. HUD has a regulating or managing component within HUD that simply addresses appraisal bias issues. In that same format that you would articulate the complaint to the lender and to the state, same thing, you could provide it to HUD. Number four is that there's the Council of Fair Housing Enforcement. And this is an entity that a lot of us have seen in national advertising, where you have a homeowner's property that was undervalued. They bring in a white family, they stand in, and if someone comes back out and reappraises it, and mystically, magically, the value jumps to some astronomical amount. Well, this is generally done through the Council for Fair Housing Enforcement. And once again, I provided this information in a very structured presentation in the PowerPoint that I can provide to all of you. And there was a gentleman that I was working with on a few cases specifically, an attorney there. He's now at the Department of Justice. And so they are also developing and have a internal component for addressing appraisal bias. You would potentially address the same complaint to the Department of Justice. And so there are really 5 steps in terms of you being able to address your complaint. So then secondly, And I apologize. They're doing work outside of my office. So if you all hear some background noise, please forgive me. So secondly, what a major resource in terms of addressing appraisal bias is we have to increase the amount of minority appraisers throughout the United States. There's a tremendous deficiency as it relates to minority appraisers. I think it's, there's different numbers, but one of the most recent numbers that I've obtained is about 3.8% minority appraisers. And so that leaves, over 96% of appraisers that are typically white, male, and, you have this, once again, unconscious bias that exists in the mindsets. I mean, racism is systemic. And so to say that, you have racism in all of these other facets of our society and it's not in appraisal, that's a fallacy. I mean, we know that it's there. We've experienced it, or somebody that we know has experienced it. And so what our organization has done, the National Society of Real Estate Appraisers, is we've set up a partnership with an HBCU right now, which is Fayetteville State University. And as a result of this partnership, we're exposing a lot of individuals are somewhat even aware, especially younger people, of the appraisal profession. They're unaware of the amount of money that can be fairly lucrative, and I guess lucrative is relative, but it's nothing to make in excess of 6 digits as a figure of speech, in this type of work. And this could be a primary job, or it could be a secondary job, or it could be something that someone goes into when they're transitioning out of an existing job. But what we've done is we've established a partnership with an HBCU. And because Fayetteville State University is located in Fayetteville, North Carolina, in very close proximity to Fort Liberty, or used to be called Fort Bragg, which this is the largest military base in the world. And so even though we're not, and I have to be careful how I say this, discriminating and not including appraisers that are not minority, we're partial to minority appraisers because this is our organization. This is who we are. And so individuals that are in the military, that are transitioning out of the military, retiring, or even, they have individuals that they have even additional jobs in the military. Because of their level of discipline and their structured thinking, we find that they're great candidates. But once again, we have a partnership with an HBCU, and our objective is to scale this to other historically Black colleges and universities throughout the country, to expose this opportunity and crisis, if you will, to students. In addition to that, we recently had a national press release that went out from Fayetteville State University. And as a result of that press release, we had about 100 or so people that are interested in really expanding the existing program that we have. So we have an overwhelming interest just based on the exposure that this is an opportunity. This is something that can provide a resource to combat a systemic issue that we're dealing with, and something that you can make a decent amount of money with. In addition to that, we have, our objective is to, and we've been corresponding with the Upward Bound programs, even providing this exposure to a high school student. They probably would have no clue as to what an appraisal is, an appraisal does, or an appraisal is. And so even exposing this to someone in high school, that may trip their consciousness to say, wait a minute, this is something that I'm interested in. Didn't know I was interested in it because I never knew that it existed. However, now that I hear this is something that I'm interested in. And that part of that is the lack of diversity, is the lack of exposure. So we're providing this resource and opportunity to upward bound students throughout the country. And there's something existing right now called the ADI program. Some of you may have heard of that, which is the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. And this is actually comprised of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Appraisal Institute. And they have, tons of money, resources, and they've been addressing or attempting to address this problem by exposing the appraisal profession to minorities throughout the country. And they want to partner with NESRA in terms of what we're doing. And I think that may be a good resource. But one of the main problems that I have with this is that the CEO of the Appraisal Institute is publishing white papers denying the existence of appraisal bias. So on one hand, you want to work with governmental entities and regulating authorities to address a problem and to increase the appraisal bias in homeowner values. But then you have the CEO of an organization that's the actual boots on the ground, the appraisal component, writing very red papers denying the existence of appraisal bias. So that has given me a lot of caution and pause in terms of partnering with them. I think that they have resources and opportunities that we can use to scale what we're doing, but we have to be very cautious in terms of how we do this. And so it almost has to be, I hate to say it like this, before us, by us. We have to lead the charge in addressing an issue in our community that has impacted, Black individuals for generations. We have to be at the forefront of getting the work done, boots on the ground. And it's okay to partner with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and HUD and all these other entities, but we have to be the driving force behind this initiative. And so my thoughts in closing is that it may be a potential resource to partner with NARAB and NESRA, because NARAB has been tapped by Wells Fargo to expand on the appraisal training and education. And so we're going to use that opportunity to expand NESRA. But maybe if we had these same partnerships that we're doing with HBCUs, we start doing these same partnerships with the various cities for which the mayors on this call are associated with. The mayors may pick, by some methodology of selecting individuals, 10 people or 15 people from their local community that they want to be a part of an appraisal training and education program. And so this is how the process starts in terms of bringing individuals into the various cities that people are there on this call, providing the appraisal training, education, getting them licensed. Then now you're expanding the footprint, you're expanding the demographics of appraisers in our Black communities throughout the United States. And just, positive breeds on itself. These individuals are going to talk to other people in the community. They're going to talk to family members. And so we'll begin to build on a positive trajectory of awareness and expansion of appraisers in the Black community. So that really, I apologize for a somewhat condensed version of what I had to provide. I will provide the PowerPoint to Stacy and this committee at a later point, and so that you'll have some frame of reference to look at a particular situation and maybe identify what could be done or what's wrong, and then the resources to address it.
Thank you so much, Brian. We greatly appreciate your presentation. Even without the slides, I think we got the picture. And so thank you so much for what you've offered. I definitely have to say, as an HBCU graduate, I'm so appreciative of the work that you all are doing with HBCUs. And towards the end of your presentation, you kind of mentioned how mayors can connect and start to get their constituents connected to the programs that you have discussed. But should they contact you directly, or should they contact NARAB? What would be the best way for our mayors to get in contact with the programs you discussed?
Great question. It could be either way. There's no wrong answer. They can contact me directly, or they can contact NARAB. We're NARAB's oldest affiliate organization. Our organization was established in 1956, so we're approximately 68 years old. But we're partnering with NARAB to expand the appraisal profession, education, and training throughout the United States. So either way would not be wrong.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know I have a few questions in the queue, but I will open it up for anyone else who may have a question. So unfortunately, Mr. Cox will not be able to join us for office hours. So if anyone has a question, now is the time.
Yes, sir, Mr. Rainey.
Yes, so I just wanted to ask, I know as far as you mentioned comparables and as being part of the appraisal process, what qualifies as a comparable property? Is that the sale through a lender, or is it that it hit the market? But in a rural community, we've had several homes being built, but they were not included in the comps.
Yeah, that's a great question. The general rule in terms of selecting comparable sales, particularly, I do a lot of rural appraisals as well. And the rule is you can extend your search for market data as far as necessary to get credible results. And so there's no limitation. You got to stay within 1 mile, 2 miles. I've done appraisals in rural communities where I had to go 20 miles out beyond the subject property. And what constitutes a comparable is almost in that definition of the word comparable. It's generally properties that are similar to the house that's being appraised, similar when compared to the age of the property, the condition of the property, the size of the property, and particular features of the property. This is where appraisers have somewhat of a discretion in terms of, and the appraisal process starts to go south because oftentimes they're comparing a home that may be in a Black community to homes that are inferior as it relates to one of those components. And so we really want to train agents and the general public to look at all of the information that an appraiser would use. A lot of this, in most cases, is public information, meaning that even if you don't have MLS, there's Zillow, there's Redfin, there's all these other sources. You just put the address of the house that's being compared to your property in this particular search engine, and you're going to see all the components of this house, the interior, the exterior. And so automatically, when you're looking at this report, you're saying, wait a minute, this house is falling apart. On looking at the appraisal form, you don't really see that. But when you take that extra step and you look at this property on the interior and see that the property, your house may not have been renovated at all, but the house that's being compared is still inferior in a number of different components, red flag. And this is how you start to address your complaint in the narrative format. I don't know if that answered your question. I can elaborate.
It did answer it, and it spoke to what we're dealing with in our city and the surrounding areas. So we're trying to do some home development, but setting the comps is what we have the challenge of doing. So we're having to build homes now to set our own comps, so then we get fair market value for the homes that are being built and sold.
Yeah, no, that sometimes you have to do that, set your own comps. But once again, if an appraiser would have to go 20 miles or 30 miles outside of the market area to find a new home sale to compare it to your new home sale, then that should be done by the appraiser, and it should just be explained. And it would be an acceptable methodology to, it's called bracketing, to bracket your subject's features. And so once again, an appraisal that comes back, then you're looking at an appraisal and all the comps are right in the neighborhood, but they're all older houses and inferior. That's a red flag. That appraiser should have gone out further to find an appropriate house that is quote unquote comparable to your property. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for answering that question. We are unfortunately at time. I just want to thank you and also Latrice for sharing such a wealth of knowledge with us today. So much more information I know that you both have and not enough time. So thank you both for what you all offered today. And I will give the floor back over to my colleague, Stacy, for some closing remarks.
Okay.
Well, Ms. Victoria, I appreciate you being so time conscious. We really do probably have time for maybe one more question or so, if our mayors would like to ask, because Mr. Cox is leaving us shortly. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Cox? Okay, well then I will ask a question, Mr. Cox.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell me, sir, what is one idea or concept you wish people knew or understood about owning property?
About owning property. Well, property ownership is accessible to everyone. However, it's like anything else, it's based on preparation. If you're going to own, of course, it's always better to own than to rent. and there may be like very limited circumstances in which rental may be an advantage for some type of tax purpose or write-off purposes. But nevertheless, I would recommend that anybody that is even remotely, if you can rent a home, you can buy a home. And it's just a matter of being properly prepared with your credit, with your income. And income is almost not even as much of a driving factor, other than the fact that there's a lack of affordable housing throughout the nation. But an individual, if you can rent an apartment, you can buy a condo. And so my thoughts once again would be home ownership is accessible to everyone based on the appropriate preparation.
Thank you. This session is in conjunction with a home ownership session that we also did, and our mayors are putting together strategic plans to have events in their areas. So it seems like it'd be maybe a natural fit to do a home ownership piece and then maybe even an appraisals piece that's a part of the same event, since they all kind of work together.
Excellent.
Yeah, okay. Well, do we have any other questions for Mr. Cox? I'll ask you one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
In your experience, what are some of the potholes or missteps we need to avoid when implementing some of these programs or resources to advance economic mobility opportunities, particularly with property ownership?
In all honesty, I'm somewhat of at a disadvantage in terms of answering that question, but I'll do my best. It really goes down to, once again, education and being aware of the various components and requirements of the program, being properly advised or informed in terms of the logistics or the requirements of each program, and then determining how those programs would apply to you, to the individual homeowner, because there are so many programs out there and they have varying qualification criteria. You have to be somewhat versed in the programs and be able to see which program best fits for you. And so being in contact with the appropriate governmental entities and lending institutions, there's a wealth of information out there. And so the more questions, the better. Don't be apprehensive in terms of asking a question, because this is going to be new to most people, particularly first-time home buyers, and sometimes even a seasoned home buyer. This is not something that you do every day. You may buy a home every 10 years or 5 years or 20 years. And so things change. And so you have to be very forthright in terms of asking questions and not being ambivalent or hesitant, because you may not know something. You're not expected to know a lot of these things because this is not your everyday job. And so, homeowners should be encouraged to not be apprehensive or hesitant in terms of asking as many questions as they can possibly think of, because this is how you learn.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Cox. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We've recorded today's session and we'll make it available online. You will be able to see the links to the products discussed today in your EMLI LinkedIn group. Special thanks to our partners at USDA and NSREA for closing out our session around land usage and appraisals while Black. Our next EMLI session will be on September 5th, 2024, focusing on student loans. Be sure to follow us on social media at Our Mayors and visit us online at ourmayors.org. Thank you for joining us today. This concludes the session. Our office hour begins now.
Thank you.